Have you ever struggled to get your company or investment fund to rapidly scale? Do you ever wish you could just sit down with an executive that has done it and learn their system? Well, in this week's episode of Making Billions, I bring on my friend Sarah Sullivan. Sarah is the founder and CEO of SuGo Capital. She grew this company from zero to $500 million of assets under management in just 3 years. Sarah is going to share with us how she got started, how she found powerful partners, and how she hires and rapidly scale to $500 million in just 3 years. Knowing how to scale, finding meaningful partnerships, and hiring people that will love your company are all skills we need in our pursuit of making billions. Here we go. Hey, welcome to another episode of Making Billions. I'm your host, Ryan Miller, and today I have my dear friend, Sarah Sullivan. Sarah is the founder of a $500 million real estate fund out of California called SuGo Capital. Sarah is a renowned investor and speaker. She sits on the Forbes Real Estate Council and came ready to share with us her kick-butt methods on how she built SuGo Capital, as well as how she scaled from scratch to $500 million in just a few years. So what this means is that Sarah understands how to build businesses from scratch, but also how to scale them. So all elements we need in building a successful business, being a fund, a startup, or otherwise. So Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I'm really excited to be here. And hello to all the listeners. And I really appreciate your giving heart, your generosity of, having people on your show and really generously focusing on how can you really add value to people's lives. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Sarah. You're very kind. I've had a chance. I know we've crossed paths a few times at different speaking events that you've been at, and many other things. And I've just been so impressed at how you've gone from scratch to $500 million fund in the real estate sector, and you're contributing to Forbes and you're speaking around the world. I mean, you're doing all of these things and it just seems like you came out of nowhere, and often success is, right? As the saying goes, I worked my entire life to be an overnight success. And so I suspect we're going to hear a little bit about that. But before we get into that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you became this, real estate phenom that you are. Where did it start for Sarah?
Okay. Yeah. And a lot of people do say that to me, like, wow, this all happened overnight. And they just didn't see the 10 years of working up to the point of trying different things. I didn't always know it was going to be real estate. I didn't know it was always going to be in the capital raising space or in fund management. But I knew it was going to be something, and I tried different things for 10 years until, boom, I found the thing that was aligned. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is finding what is aligned with your passion, your vision, your goals for yourself, and also your natural talents. Yeah, real estate. I started in real estate about 10 years ago. And for me, it was a way to invest personally. So I had a baby and I was thinking, okay, I need some extra income. So I started going to all these coaching programs about fix and flip, buy and hold, single family rentals, Airbnb. And I dabbled in 15 different types of real estate investing. And I either lost money or I lost a boatload of time figuring out that it wasn't the thing for me, until I came to the multifamily investing space. And it was like all things were aligned. The passive income, the stability, the peace I felt around that type of investing. So it really aligned with me personally. And then I grew a business out of it because I wanted other people to feel the peace, the stability, the comfort, the predictability with their finances that I was feeling when I was investing in multifamily.
That is phenomenal. And so, I'm curious about the road that led up to it. You talked about like you're trying different stuff. You dipped your toe into the tech world and you did a few things. Maybe you could talk about, for many of our founders who are listening to the show, we talk about fund managers, venture capital, and startup founders. A lot of them start in businesses. They're building skills. They're figuring stuff out. Also doing side hustles. The early days before you were all in on SuGo Capital, what was going on in your life? How did your career evolve into that?
I grew up in New Orleans and my father was a contractor, and we were really taught, hey, the best way to be extremely successful is to go to school, get a good job. And I was raised very frugally. Money was not something that you waste, you protect. And so I grew up thinking, okay, the best way to succeed in this life I have is go to school, get an education, get a job, work really great, climb that corporate ladder. So that's what I did for the first 40 years of my life. And it wasn't a straight line though. So I went to undergrad. I studied business and economics, and I started climbing the corporate ladder at my job. And I was like, whoa, this is really not what I thought it was going to be like. It was success according to other people's metrics. But to me, I felt like I was living paycheck to paycheck and like, wow, this is going to be the next 50 years of my life. I don't have time for anything else. I thought, the best way to financial freedom is to get more education. Then I can get a better job. So I got my MBA in marketing and finance. And I thought, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to have this huge signing bonus. We talked about this, Ryan. And I told my husband, with my huge signing bonus from my MBA, I'm going to buy you whatever sports car you want, because we had been married about a year at that point. But I graduated in 2008. So no signing bonus, no job at all.
Surprise.
And so, surprise. Yeah. Along with 80% of MBAs that year not getting jobs. So at that point, I said, I didn't really like my life anyway. Let me take a 180-degree turn. We moved to Europe and I went to circus school full time.
No
And
way.
I studied to be an acrobat and an aerial artist, and I became a trapeze artist, and I performed in Europe. And I thought, this is truly fun. It was the funnest time of my life, right? I was playing all day. And then it got to a point where I was like, except I'm poor. I have a lot of fun, but I'm poor. So I got to figure out how to have time so I can have fun, have a life, and also have a lot of money. And so I wasn't sure what that was, but we moved back to California, had some babies. Fast forward to going back to work, I thought, okay, now I'm going to climb that corporate ladder again. This is going to be, my next chance. And so I went from individual contributor, manager, director, worked at tech companies, educational institutions, worked at tech startups. And each time I moved, I was just getting a little bit bigger bump in my salary. I was really chasing that salary. And each time I got a little bump in salary, I got a huge bump in the amount of time I needed to spend at that job. And so actually my ratio of fun and freedom and time and money was getting worse in the wrong direction. So during this time, I was studying real estate and I was trying to grow different businesses around real estate, but they were all focused on me and my time and doing it by myself, and those were not successful. Fast forward to one night, I had kind of an out of body experience where I was being a really bad, ugly mom. And it was because my life it had too much in it. And I was giving so much to my job and so much to trying to figure out, what side hustle is right. And I had, an hour a day with my little baby kids. And so I made a commitment that I would be able to quit my job within a year. So I don't know what it's going to be, but enough faffing around. I've been trying for almost a decade to figure it all out. And I said, okay, I need to draw a line. It's going to be a year from now. And so I just loaded up with coaching programs, online marketing, online events, real estate, copyright, like all this stuff, building businesses, scaling businesses. I said, I'm really committed, and I made that really clear goal. And so in tandem to while I was working, I did build SuGo Capital. And about a year in, I got the opportunity to jump out of my job and go full time into SuGo Capital. And that was 2 years ago. My quitiversary, as I call it, was 2 years ago, almost exactly today. And so we've scaled it extremely fast. We have almost 500 million assets under management. And we're going to talk about some of the things that allowed me to do that. And they were lessons I learned. I wish I learned them way earlier would have prevented a lot of gray hairs, and we would have scaled even faster.
That's incredible. Thank you. That is a beautiful story. It's a similar story to a lot of entrepreneurs, which you are. So building a fund is also building a business. And often, myself included, where throughout your career, you reach threshold. And that's not always in your career, but there's a point, and this is a very common and popular story, and I think is because it's actually the moment that works, is where you there's cracks in this shell of life that you've created, and it's no longer working. You've reached threshold, be it your career, different relationships, your money, whatever it is. You just had enough. And for our listeners around the world, I want you to really recollect what Sarah has said, which is she reached a threshold, and in that moment she busted through threshold. It was all about her kids and her babies, and was like, this is not the life that I signed up for. Yeah, I'm trying to get my money right, but not at the expense of my family. So you reach that threshold, and boy, did you light a fire, man. You went for it. So you're like, 1 year, that's all I got. Let's go. As the proverbial burn the boats, you were all in, and that's the moment that it really started to change.
And I tell that to people all the time. If you don't have a really specific goal, like a number and a date, and you tell someone who's going to hold you to it, who's actually meaningful, like you're just going to faff around for years trying to, like, one day I'm going to start my business, or one day I'm going to quit my job. And I talk to investors like that all the time. And I'm like, no, what is your number? What is your income you need to replace? Do you need passive? Do you need a wealth number? What's the date? Write it down, put it in front of you, tell your spouse, tell your kid, who, like, you have to be really deliberate when you have goals that are really important. Otherwise, they don't happen.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So here you are, you built SuGo Capital, you went all in on marketing, events, and speaking and real estate, and you went from side hustle, you worked a little bit in the tech industry, you got your MBA, you did all of these things as a spry youngster that we all were at one point. And still are. And now you started to go into take control of your life. That's what it was about. And often we see a lot of entrepreneurs are saying, yeah, the money's going to be good. But what it's about is impact. It's about freedom. It's about spending more time with my family. It's really, what does it actually mean? It's, what does this money or this business or this lifestyle mean to me? And you got very, very clear on that. And then you built SuGo Capital. So I'd love to shift gears a little bit into SuGo Capital, and maybe you can talk a little bit about what you guys are up to today.
So we've been doing multifamily syndications. We've acquired 24 commercial properties over the last few years, and we've had 2 funds. So we were kind of dabbling with, do we want to do fund model? Do we want to keep it as individual syndications? What does our investor base want? We have about 10,000 investors in our SuGo Capital community. So it was a lot of like trying different things over the last 12 months. So we've decided to go all in on the fund model going forward. And instead of doing these one-off syndications, we are going all in on multifamily. That is still the type of real estate that I feel is going to weather the storm of, what's been going on. We've made insane money over the last couple of years with everything going wonky, and absolutely things are going wonky in the future. And so compared to, what's going on in the different markets that have liquidity, that have volatility, right now, the apartment complexes in the emerging markets, in the stable core markets, they're just really, really smart decisions right now. And they are fluctuating a little bit. We're seeing fluctuations like this in the market, but we're not seeing fluctuations like this in the market, like we're seeing, in stocks and also in the single family home space. So yeah, we're definitely staying in the multifamily space. And because of that volatility that we're seeing everywhere, we're also banking on stuff. So we're either banking on stuff that doesn't have that volatility, or we're going all in on stuff that has volatility, and we're using that volatility. We're playing with the volatility on purpose, and we're profiting from the volatility. So I think people get in trouble when they're investing for the long run in things that are volatile. But instead, if you bank on that volatility and take advantage of it, that's where the real money comes in. So we're doing those 2 things. They're kind of polar opposites, but we're looking to grow into an investment firm that has a breadth of offerings for investors. A lot of our investors, they've been in 5, 6, 7 properties and projects, and they're like, what else do you have? And so being so narrow, we've become an expertise in this niche, but then also our investor base trusts us to suggest additional things in order to diversify their portfolio and their wealth and their income. So we've been doing due diligence on different things over the last year, and we've come up with some really fun things that I'm excited to launch this year that are outside of real estate.
I can't wait to see it. So I'm assuming you're talking about like hedge fund type of products.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
perfect. As we're talking about this ascent from 0 to 500 million in just like, I don't know, 3 years or something like that. It's something crazy like that. Like good for you. That's a ride on a rocket ship if I ever heard one. So what are, from my understanding is you have kind of two main products that you offer some of your investors. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Since you're a 506c, you can kind of cover these things. So
yeah, definitely. So we have two models, and one is for individuals who are on a fixed income and they really care about cash flow because they are living off of their investments for their day-to-day expenses. And so that's the 12% cash flow fund. It's 1% per month on your money, 7 years, principal returned at the end. It's very simple. It's backed by assets. It's all multifamily complexes that fund holds. It's just accounting on how the returns come out. And then we have another model where we split the cash flow and the capital gains with investors. So what it turns into is an 18 to 20% annualized, mostly in the form of capital gains on the back end. And those are that's the new fund model that we're going to do, and one of our past fund models as well. That was the most successful with our investors.
Wow. So you have something for everybody. And one of the things when for our fans around the world, I just want to highlight the brilliance of SuGo Capital and Sarah. So when you're talking to different people who have different objectives, a lot of the times because they're at different phases in their life. And so in the early phase, you're just, when you're young, you're maybe got your first job as an analyst or, whatever it is that you're doing. You want to grow the capital. It's not so much cash flow based. And so Sarah, you and I were talking a little bit offline here, but you were bang on figuring that out, is to say, well, I'm going to be talking to all kinds of people. So our founders, whether you're in a fund or a different business, really understand the persona or the market that you're addressing and the different people within that market and what are those needs and how does your product satisfy those needs, right? So you did that. Every startup does that, and you did it, and you were handsomely rewarded for it. So, finding those people who are saying, I need cash flow right now, probably later in the phase. You anticipated that, you created a product for that, and it hit and it landed well. And then the other people to say, on the other side of that spectrum, I also have a product. If you don't want cash flow, you just want to grow. Well, it's grow time, as they say. So you definitely had something for growth and something for cash flow, and you were able to absolutely dominate your market. I mean, my jaw has hit the floor when I found out you had 500 million AUM in 3 years. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So absolutely phenomenal. Kudos to you for figuring out who is your market and building a product around what your product wants. We see that in VC. We see that in every kind of startup. We call it product market fit, and you absolutely nailed it. So I want to illustrate the power of nailing product market fit.
Yeah, and I always say to people, be really clear on who you want to serve with your business, because that'll help you align. I don't have to sell people on my investments because I know who I want to serve. I know what they want, and then I built what they want, and so then they just want it. And I didn't just guess what they would want. I did surveys, I did conversations. I did conjoint analysis to say, would you prefer this or would you prefer this in my surveys and stuff like that. So it wasn't, it wasn't me just coming up with something and then trying to, find something that fit. It was very purposeful. I knew that I wanted to, we talked about this a bit, growing up, since money was something that created nervous energy with my parents and with my family. Money was a nervous thing. It's not that we were, homeless or broke, but it was a nervous thing. It wasn't bountiful. It was something that was held tight. And there was nervous energy around, is there enough for the future? How do we invest it? There was nervousness. And so carrying that nervousness, even when I was, in corporate making a good salary, I had that nervousness. And so for me, when I found something that gave me peace, I immediately thought of my mom and I said, I want my mom to have this peace. And I want other people like my mom to have this peace, this peacefulness, knowing, oh, I found a place to put my money. I know how it's going to grow. And I am happy with those returns. And, feeling financially peaceful, having calm energy around their money, that is really, really, really the core of my business and what I set out to do as I grew my business. And, I had my financial goals in the early days. And when I hit those, I sent an email to my investor base and I said, I hit my goals. Thanks everyone for being a partner on this journey. And I had an outpour. I was crying because the emails I got back from our investors saying, you changed my life. I was able to retire earlier. I was able to retire more comfortably, more luxuriously. The peace that people felt knowing that they had invested with me, I was like, okay, wow, it's not about me anymore. Like I've impacted lives. I get to impact more lives. So there's a lot of people who already know about multifamily syndication and they're all hooked up in the network and, that's all good. But there are millions and millions of people who would love to hear about multifamily syndication and invest in it who haven't. And so those are the people I was reaching and they were just so excited. So that's why that day, that was on my birthday 2 years ago, when I was like, oh, it's not about me. I'm impacting lives. I'm creating peace around money energy for people. I have to figure out how to scale this while keeping true to myself and my reason for starting this business. And so I had to think about how to scale without more of my time because I was already maxed out and I wanted to work, a 2.5 day work week. So how do you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that done? So I know we're going to talk about that, but that's a bit, I was so connected to who I wanted to serve that it was really easy for me to, purposely build something that was great for them.
Wow. So a couple of things, couple of takeaways is just number one, understand your market and the power of understanding that. But number two, you bring up you said the magic I word. I swear there must be like confetti that rains from the sky. When you say the secret word. No, it's no longer a secret because for those of you who've been following the show, for people who Sarah and a lot of the other guests that have gone before, there's one thing that they all had in common, and it wasn't income. It was impact. Yes, I guess income as well, but it wasn't the driver. The income was the output, but it was the drive for the impact that was the input. And so when it clicks, that's that next threshold where, just when you cranked it up after you had that realization that you created a life that wasn't acceptable and you created circumstances, you changed those circumstances, and then you found another gear again when you realize this is bigger than me. It started with me getting my life right, getting my money right, getting my time right. And now you've broke through another threshold, you found another gear and you grind it even harder when you realize that this is about impact, and the impact you were creating is peace and hope. Right? So those things that maybe, maybe you didn't understand, maybe you did when you were a kid, I'm not sure, but as you got older, you started to understand what was that like, that energy, and it's told that it takes on the spirit, the human spirit. And so you're starting to affect people on such a deep level by holding your light and pursuing your dream. You were able to create peace and hope for your investors. So that's absolutely, we call it, in your world, it's called investors, and in the startup world, they're called customers. But either way, these are people that came to you to solve a solution, and that solution that you provided was hope. So kudos to you. That is absolutely phenomenal.
Really keep a really tight pulse on your clients, your investors, whoever you're serving, because we came to a point where, once you have staff, you can get quite removed from the people that you're serving. And to me, I felt a bit empty. And then I got back in touch and really connected again with my investor base. And then that's when I heard what they wanted next. Like, okay, now we want some investment that's, like this over here. And so now that's when I'm like, oh, okay, I get to build something else for them. So I'd say just don't lose touch with your customers, your clients, your investors. as you grow.
So that is powerful advice, because very often you build a company and then you're a victim. We'll say victim. Don't feel bad for us, but you're a victim of your own success. You become a CEO and you got this whole like organization below you or beside you or whatever, all around you. I guess you're surrounded on all sides. And what Sarah did is she kind of stepped down from the throne, so to speak. You didn't say that. I certainly did. You stepped down from the throne and you said, you know what? I need to keep my finger on the pulse. And what that means is I need to really stay close to my customers that I serve. That's where it started. And that's where it's always going to be, is very customer centric. In your case, investor or LP centric. And so because of that wise decision, you were able to figure out new products that you should release because you kept hearing them, you were listening to them, and you were very up to speed on the impact and the needs that were desired from your investors. So I absolutely
Exactly.
love
You
that.
got it, Ryan.
Yeah, bingo. So hey, you're teaching me. This is great. So and are you guys accepting investment capital right now? Are you still fundraising right now in your fund?
Yeah, we always have something open. And so our homepage, SuGoCapital.com, it has our open offerings. So we have a new development project in Phoenix, and we have our cash flow fund is open. And whatever we have open, we always have it on that front page.
One of the things that I absolutely love doing this is we have these key takeaways. I warned you I was going to ask you about some of the key lessons that you've learned, and you've been very generous in sharing those already. I'm wondering what are some of those areas or some couple of things that you can provide now that you have the benefit of looking back. Hindsight's 2020. So you now have that benefit of looking back and to say, here's some things I liked, here's some things I would have done differently. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of those areas that you might be able to suggest for people just starting out?
Yeah, so you heard about the decade or so of me faffing around. So that was when I was trying to do things on my own, like solo Sarah during that time. And I didn't make much progress because I was trying to be everything in the endeavors I was trying to do. So when things really took off is when I found, what was aligned with me, the multifamily investing and the right partnership. So I went to the head coach of a program I'd been through, and I said, "Why aren't you 10 times as big as you are right now?" And with his answer, I said, "Those are exactly things that I can do, I want to do, and I'm great at." And so we partnered up and we blew up each other's portfolios. And that's when it all took off because he had an expertise in asset management, in running the properties. He had the long time business relationships required for the brokers, the lenders, etc. And so when we partnered up, we both really took off. And I wish I had done that sooner. I wish I had partnered sooner. And it is so much nicer to have 50% of a huge pie than 100% of a little tiny pie.
Yes. Yes. Wow. So would you say that because, there's a point, and maybe that's at the beginning or maybe it's later on in your journey, but at some point in the founder's journey, you got to hire a partner. You need someone who you can lock arms with and say, let's go take on the world. We're going to really tear this thing up and we're going to do awesome things together. Would you say like finding a partner way ahead, way, at your level? I mean, where do you find them? What kind of partners do you like? Really, let's dive deep into this partner thing.
Yeah, it's a good question because I think a lot of people do this wrong. So a lot of people, they go to meetups or networking events and they find someone who's like at the same level of experience that they are or the same level of ambition as they are, and they try to partner up. So when I was in the tech space, in the startup space in Silicon Valley, one of my CEOs, he said, "Oh, I'm going to such and such meetup." And I was like, well, that's like, our startup at that time had like 80 people. And what he was going to is for CEOs of companies that had thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And so he's like, I'm not going to go to something where there's, CEOs that have 50 to 100 people. What am I going to learn from them? I'm going to the networking event for people who have these massive companies that they've already grown. And there's no point. And I was like, yeah, I mean, now that you say it, duh. But So a lot of people, though, in whatever industry you're in or whatever profession you're in, lots of times people meet up with other people who are at the same place they are. And I would say, don't do that. Take yourself out, go put yourself in the room with people who are way ahead of you in the area that you want to excel in. So, who have already been doing what you want to be doing for the last 10 years, who have already reached the goals that you want to reach. And just, make that your network and ask them, hey, what would be valuable? What's a gap in your business that you need filled? And if you hear of a gap and it's something that you're like, that is what I want to do, and that's what I'm really good at, then provide value to their business, help them grow their business. You're going to get swept along in their success. And then you can split off later, find different partners, whatever. But especially when you're trying to get started or massively grow, find someone who's already on that path, ahead of you on that path. And how can you serve them, help them grow with what you are good at or really want to do? And, Ryan, like we talked about this because I joined a community that you're one of the coaches for. And it's definitely for the community. And, you're an awesome coach there. Um, but it's those kinds of things that will really excel you, and it's not going to the free meetups and networking events. It's getting plugged in to the pay to play events because those people are serious. Those people are paying their 50K per year because they're making a difference. They are paying attention. They're in that room. They have big goals, or they've already gotten there, and they're looking for you to help them get to the next level because they don't want to do a thing that they're bad at, and they're looking for the person that's they can plug in to help grow their business. So those are always the rooms that have really, one moment where it's like, whew, something happened. I linked arms with someone, and then everything took off.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And yes, so thank you. You're very kind. I get asked that all the time from a lot of people who are starting out, much like when I started out and you started out. We were all in that position. We were beginners at one point. And a lot of them do reach that point of saying, you know what, I'm feeling like I need a partner. This feels like a lot. And I said, yeah, okay, maybe it is. That's relative to your capacity. But either way, yeah, I get it. Eventually you're going to need somebody like right there with you the whole way. And the light bulb just clicked for me as you were telling your story, because that's where it started for me. And so when I talk to people, I said, look, if you want, join a community, but the important thing is it's not enough. It's one thing to get in the room. It's another to be known that you're there. And so one of the ways that you get to known for being there is by actually being generous. And so I challenge everybody, and anyone listening to this right now is saying, you would be surprised at how far generosity in the right community will take you. I recently linked up with, I won't say their names, but some very famous influencers. And like, to me, right, these are these people that are just heads and tails in their career, and I have so much admiration for them. And then they accept my friend request or whatever they could, connection request. I don't know what they call it anymore, but anyways, we're connected. And literally they wrote me an email and said, is there anything I can do to serve you? And I was like, you want to serve me? What? And it clicked. And I was like, this is what I teach everybody else, is to say, being generous can make you very well off, because if you truly want to build a relationship, be someone who is known for giving instead of taking. And that's why, and you and I talked about this, that's why a lot of people don't go to these meetups, these networking. It's almost like a gross word to say the word networking anymore, because everyone's there to take, right? Hire me to be your dry cleaner, or your attorney, or your accountant, or, whatever, or vote for me in the next election. And so you get a room of people who are there to take. And unfortunately, anybody with means or the ability to help you, or anyone who's at that higher level that you talked about, they don't go to those things. Why? Because everyone's there to take. And imagine finding a community that Sarah's talking about, where you're in a room where everybody's there to give. What a different experience. Who wouldn't want to find a partner in a room like that? I would, you would, we all would. And so being generous in the right community can absolutely lead you to make the relationships that can change your life. It's happened for me and it's happened for Sarah. And I know it'll happen. If you're hearing my voice, it'll happen for you too. So that being said, where have you found some of those communities? You mentioned masterminds. Any other areas?
Yeah, masterminds, coaching programs. Yeah, those two.
Masterminds, coaching
Multiples
programs?
of those two.
Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful. These are real things that you can implement today. So,
And it's often in an area that, I don't go to real estate masterminds because also everyone in those, they often end up doing the same thing the same way. And so you're going to get a competitive edge if you go to a mastermind for a different industry or a multi-industry mastermind, because you're going to learn, wow, there's so many different ways to do this. I never thought of and apply it to your business. So you can be innovative just by listening and applying someone else's idea in, the tech world to the real estate world you're in or whatever it is. And you can do the same for them. You can say, oh, I know you've been head down in this tech space, but we're doing this in the real estate space. I think it would be cool. And they're like, whoa. So there's all kinds of innovation that can come out of it just because you're applying things across industry.
I love that. And one of my good friends, Brent Maude, he's over at Bowtie Capital. He started out, he talked about he would pitch at these real estate meetups and he would talk about making money in storage units. And people are like, wow, that's really great. And it was good. And then he realized everybody knows what I'm talking about, probably has got capital deployed in this sector. And then he shifted to a different vertical. I think he said hedge fund meetups and stuff. And he was like, I'm going to talk to you about real estate. And they're like, first they're like, what is this guy doing here? But then eventually they realized the wisdom of saying, yeah, keep doing hedge funds, but maybe I need to diversify in this other sector. And so that's exactly your point, is you're saying, don't get caught in the echo chamber, diversify these different communities. And then I'm adding to that is to say, and remember to be generous and also just keep your eye open to say, am I in that right community where people are willing to give and support, whether that's advice or a listening ear? Coaching is certainly part of that. So finding those different verticals and those different groups, avoiding the echo chamber can certainly help you to find and scale into different communities. So what are some of those key methods that you've found? Speaking of scaling, something you know a little bit about. I keep threatening you that I'm going to get that out of you. So maybe we talk about that now. So what are some of the things that you found that has helped you to scale so quickly?
The biggest thing is, besides partnerships, is because partnerships are good to get started, and then partnerships you're sharing equity. So once you learn something, if you can bring it in-house and have employees, that's going to have a much higher ROI for you. So scaling by hiring the right employees at the right time. And so I thought this was kind of a silly thing for us to talk about because I'm like, everyone knows that. But then I had a conversation just an hour before we jumped on with one of my larger VIP investors. He's invested several million with us. And then I was saying, oh, I got out of a meeting. I hired a new COO and, this is the new org chart and this is what we're hiring to plug in. Oh man, he was so excited. And it really brought him confidence that not only am I scaling by number of properties and, dollars in the fund and all that kind of stuff, but I was scaling a team of people to support that and to support the investors. And so I was telling him the reason that I've hired for these different roles and that I'm hiring for the next roles that I'm hiring for are so that I have more time for phone calls with the VIP investors, more time to really plug into the community and connect with them and get out of running the business and connect with. He was like, that you are spot on, Sarah. That's why I've invested with you. That's why I'm continuing to invest with you. So even though it sounds kind of boring, it can 100% be the key to delighting investors is hiring other people to do all the other stuff so you can just talk to investors, especially if you're the face of your company and you're the reason they're investing with you is because of those relationships you've built.
That's brilliant. And so, and what else? What else? So you've got the org chart and you're able to talk about that with investors. So you're able to illustrate your scalability. You can use that as a selling point with investors, or at least a point of building confidence in you and the way you think and approach business. What else have you found?
Well, to expand on that, because we've all seen companies, investment firms, anything that have scaled too quickly and then they collapse because they don't have the infrastructure in place or they lose track of, what they're doing, and an investment goes bad because there's just too much on everyone's plate. And so investors very much appreciate a proper scale plan. So I'll say, for people looking to scale, some of the things I did wrong in the beginning. So I had only been in corporate America. You hire full-time people is what you do. So I had, run these departments where you hire full-time people. So I initially, when I was building SuGo Capital, I hired full-time people. And because we were small, I had them wearing lots of hats. And there were lots of failures because even though I might be good at wearing lots of hats, passing lots of hats to someone else doesn't always work. It's hard to find. So I was cycling through a lot of people. And it was a waste of time because I was training them. They weren't happy. I wasn't happy. Got the next person, etc. So then when I shifted, and also something I was doing was I was like a little bit insecure about the size of SuGo Capital, and so I was trying to make it sound really cool and like this really cool investment firm. And you want to work for us because we're just like really cool and fun. And this job is going to be really cool because of X, Y, and Z. And they really are just things that I wanted to take off my plate because they weren't fun. So when I shifted into saying like, okay, here's the thing I don't want to do. I'm going to make it sound really boring, but really truthful. Like exactly what does the person need to do? This is the job description. This is one job, and this is 10 hours a week post. This other thing I'm taking off my plate. So I looked at things that either I was not competent at, or things that I was okay at, but I didn't like doing. And those are the things I started taking off of my plate first when I looked at my week and categorized my things that I was spending time on. So then there was something else like, well, I mean, I'm okay with this, but I'm okay at this thing, but I really just don't like doing it. Okay, this is 20 hours a week. I made a job description for it, posted it, and it made it sound really boring. And then whoever found it, that was excited about it, I was like, wow, if they're excited about this, they're going to be really excited when they actually come on board because I'm more fun than that. But they were totally okay with, the routineness or the, exactly what the job was. And so I was able to find better fits that way. And so I initially had a whole bunch, and still do have a bunch of part-time people working from home that work on a very specific piece of my business, and they love it. They're great at it, and that's, I found, just a much better way to scale than trying to have fewer employees but have them full time, and they're trying to do things that they're also not competent or excited about.
Wow, brilliant. So now you have these specific job descriptions. They may or may not be full time, but really the point that you're drilling down is not, first you're focused on how do I get it full time and give people enough work to do these hours, and then you shifted to say, you know what, that didn't really land the way I'd hoped. So now I'm just going to find a 10-hour a week person, or 27 and a half, something, anything weird like that. I don't know. But then you're saying, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So, but the point is saying all you do is do this one thing for me. That's all I need is 10 hours. And honestly, we're in this gig economy. Like that's not a big deal. Like people have their own little consulting businesses just to do gig work. So it's like, it actually lands, again, one more time, you nailed it on landing and knowing the market and how to navigate through that. So good for you. So, we've talked about hiring. We've talked about finding partners. Maybe the third thing, one more thing. What's one more thing that you found that's somewhat helpful to people launching their business or investment firm?
I think it's easy to become really hyper-focused on what you're doing when you're trying to grow a business, like we said, hiring the people, managing the clients or the investors, and really focusing on, your product or your investment, because you're growing. There's a lot of stuff that can occupy your mind. I have Monday and Friday are days that I don't talk to my team, and those are days for me to think and learn. And so I'm researching what's going on in the world. What are all the things that can impact supply chain for my new development projects? What are things that will impact, the markets that I'm in, the economics of, where I have my buildings? What market should I be going into next? So really thinking, like allowing yourself, and that's the importance of scaling, and hiring really great people so that you can take a step back and allow your brain to learn and expand and look at all the things happening in the world that can affect your product or your investment in the like 1 year from now and 5 years from now. So I think that's really fun to do a SWOT analysis. Like, what are the opportunities and threats to your business in the next 1 year and the next 5 years? And constantly looking at that, because there's no such thing as an evergreen product or an evergreen. Well, okay, I shouldn't say there's no such thing. There's a few things that have been the same for the past 50 years that people love still. But pretty much, usually you have to innovate, you have to switch, you have to pivot. So being ready for that ahead of when you need to do that is really important. And usually there's no evergreen investment. Like, something might be a great investment right now. And so jump on it. When you see a good investment, it's a good time, jump on it. And then always be on the lookout for the next thing. So, when you have money, that's part of your job, is being a good steward of that money. And so, that's part of what I'm doing, is always looking at additional investments to offer folks. And something that I think is really relevant right now, if you don't mind me jumping into it, Brian, is some of the shifts going on. Sorry, Ryan, and going on in the real estate space, and how people are like, oh, well, the crypto, there's been crashing, and then the exchange, there's all this like stuff. But then there's also like the backbone of it, the tokenization and blockchain, and people wanting to apply that or bring that into the real estate space. And there are institutions who have already committed to that and are going forward with that. And so thinking about how things like that, looking at a few steps past that decision. So you see politicians do this a lot, where they're like, oh, there's a problem, here's a fix. Okay, well, that fix created these 20 other problems. Did you ever think about that? And so I think that's what some people are doing in the real estate space. Like, oh, there's a problem of liquidity, and in these funds and in commercial real estate, they're great, but my money's locked up for 5-10 years, whatever it is. So, ooh, cool. Tokenization, like, we can make it so it solves that liquidity problem. But things that are highly liquid are highly volatile. So when you introduce liquidity, you introduce volatility. So if things do progress and these kind of two ideas do merge, then real estate, commercial real estate, as it has been, the peaceful, steady, non-volatile investment, could turn into a volatile investment. We saw it with when Robinhood became really popular, and the markets got even more wonky than they were before, because you had people who thought they knew what they were doing and did not know what they were doing, and emotions come into play, and they created wonkiness, they created volatility. And so if we do that same thing in the real estate market, make it really accessible to make quick trades, we're going to introduce that volatility, that wonkiness, that emotional response. And we saw things happen like with the Great Depression, the run on the bank. And then we saw that with REITs recently, where people were trying to take all their money out of the funds, and the large funds put a cap and said, hey, we're going to protect these investments by saying, investors, you can't take your money out. And people were upset. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, because if you let people take all their money out, then you make that, what was a real asset, is backed by real assets, those REITs. But now I am so glad they put those barriers on. But anyway, it's kind of a long way of saying, like, pay attention to what decisions today will do to your product, your offering in the future, and not just 1 year, but 5 years out. Like, really think of those iterations, like, then what? Then what? And then what might happen? And then what might happen? And that's one of the reasons we talked about at the beginning, that we've been, over the last 12 months, evaluating non-real estate investment opportunities, so that we're personally, like me and my home and my personal money, is prepared for what if real estate does become volatile, if it's more liquid. Like, okay, so then I want to find something where I can make a lot of money, and something that is very volatile. So then you count on the volatility and the liquidity, trading, scalping, etc. So thinking about big picture all the time. I know I went on a tangent, but
No, you're doing great. That is beautiful. And so, really understanding your market and the competitive or any force, really, not just competitive forces, but any force that can kind of push the lever and change the winds, we'll say. And that helps you to, as the saying goes, you can't change the wind, but you can always adjust your sails. And so making sure you understand the way not only the wind is blowing now, but staying close to it, making it a habit to do that and monitor those changes so that you know how to quickly adapt are fundamental in running that business. So I absolutely love that. So as we round third base, Sarah, is there any other things, any way that people can get a hold of you, or any other final closing comments that you'd like to share?
I always love to talk about investments in the investment space. So yeah, if people want to get in touch with me, sarahs360.com, sarahs360.com. That has all the ways to get in touch with me. It has everything on there. How to book a call, my website, all my social media, my email, my phone number, everything. sarahs360.com. And yeah, it has our website, which has our investments. So yeah, get in touch. We'd love to have you. We do live events almost once a week where we're doing education, free education for investors. So if you jump on our email list, you'll have access to all of those speakers, all of that information. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
That's absolutely brilliant. And, truly, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your time. And, as we wrap things up, just to consolidate all the wisdom, that was a deep well that Sarah Sullivan has shared with us, coming straight from your heart, your soul, and also your company, SuGo Capital, that you built to this behemoth in a few years. So to summarize things, just finding partners that are operating at a level above you, being generous. And if you're a CEO, make sure that you don't get too caught up in the organization, that you forget to stay close to your customers. And finally, stay close to those changing forces affecting your industry. You do these things, and you too will be well on your way in your pursuit of making billions.